Call the charter review meeting to order. Commissioner Smith, can you give us the prayer and the pledge, please, sir?
Our Father, we come once again, thankful for the many blessings you bestowed upon us and this opportunity to be service to this city. We ask you, God, for your blessings tonight and your guidance as we partake the charter review, that you will lead us and guide us in all that we shall say and do with pleasing and acceptable in your sight. Now, Father, we pray for the family of Commissioner Alonzo Williams and his passing, that you will hold them in the hollow of your hand, lift them up as only you can. This we pray in thy Son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we can get right into it. Cliff, it's the Cliff Shepherd Show.
Yes, sir. Is it all right if I do it from here? I can certainly do it from the podium.
Whichever you'd like.
Actually, if it was going to be 15 or 20 minutes, I'd stay in there, but for 2 hours, I would prefer to sit just in case I don't fall down. So this is the first time you've seen one of these memos, except maybe I might have sent one from another city to show you what they would look like. And so in addition to walking you through the sections of the charter, as I go, I'm going to explain why the various markings mean what they mean so you can interpret them as you go forward. As we discussed, we're going to be going through the charter article by article, and based on the prior decision of council, it'll be 2 articles at a time because there's only 6 articles in the charter. The second thing I want to reiterate for you and everyone here is that just because I have said that I have nothing to discuss or no recommended changes, that doesn't mean you don't or may not have something. You certainly may, and if you do, you will have your time to bring it to my attention and when we'll have that discussion. When I say none, it means that I have seen no legal reason that y'all need to change it, or I have never heard anybody express some sort of a desire to look at a potential for changing the thing. So in either case, if I've seen where that's caused a problem somewhere else or have seen an expression of interest in a change, I might put that in as a reminder to you that this is something that's been brought up. But if I don't put it in, it's not me saying don't change it. It's me saying I have no reason to change it because I'm not about do it this way or do it that way. This is your charter. My goal is to lead you through where I know there might be problems and also know where there has been interest expressed in looking at the issue. So with that, let's start with Article 1. No surprises here. For the first 2 articles, much of it is going to be that there's none to look at or nothing to change. But I was told this would work, so we'll see how well it goes. The IT department, Kelly, was nice enough to turn this memo into a slide show. So hopefully I'll be able to navigate that all right. So Article 1 is the corporate name. And if there's an interest in having the government changed from mayor council or we call a strong mayor to a council manager form of government, one of the changes that would have to be made is highlighted. So if you look at the highlights, anywhere you see highlights in the current language of the charter, that's the language that I'm focusing on that will be considered for a change. That's all the highlight means when you see the first listing there of the article. It's a direct quotation as the charter currently exists according to Municode. And I say that according to Municode is important because, as you know earlier, we had a situation where, according to Municode, we had something that didn't be accurate. So if any one of you or anyone in the public says that's not accurate, I'll have to go back to Municode. Generally speaking, they're fairly reliable, but this year, or last year, I guess I'd say, both your charter and Eatonville's charter had a provision that, according to Municode, was accurate that turns out was not accurate. So if you see something, say something. But I'm presuming that what you have here is accurate. So if you are interested in discussing or having as a potential amendment going from mayor council to council manager form of government, this is one of the changes that we made. The area for discussion, as it says, does the town wish to consider changing to a council manager form of government? If the answer to this is yes, this decision will require additional amendments to other sections of the charter which are not yet drafted and have not yet been considered. let me explain how that would work. If you say, if there's enough support on the idea, let's put this to the voters, then a number of places where the charter currently is set up as a strong mayor government would have to also change. But we're not going to get to all of those today. What would happen, if that's the direction that we get to go down, is one of the ballot questions will be, shall the government of, the form of government be in Apopka be changed from strong mayor or mayor council to council manager, yes or no? That essentially would be the question. The substantive amendments would be everything that's needed to effectuate that change, all a part, so it's all consistent. And so that's what I mean by other changes that you won't see today are not going to be discussed, but this would be one of those changes at that point if that's the decision that's made. For that particular section, then the next section that reads how it would read with all changes is my showing you, if you went down this road, the only thing that would change in that specific paragraph is it would be a corporation with a council manager form of government. That would be the change to section 1.01. So now I've got through the first section. Questions from you all, discussion amongst you all.
So just some general logistical questions around how we're stepping through this. So we're looking at Article 1, Section 1, right? Once we, as a council, collectively discuss this topic, should we then pivot to public comment for their feedback? How should this operate in that, from a logistical?
I believe it's the mayor's intention to take comment at the end, but that's really a matter for you all to determine how you want to go about it. You could do it at the beginning, you could do it as you go, or you can do it at the end. That's not a preference for me. That's basically how you want to run your meeting. But to answer a question you haven't asked, which is relevant, is, okay, let's suppose we say we're interested in that, what next? Well, between now and the next time, you will be, if there's other parts, and I think there may be, that need to be changed to accommodate that, I will be presenting to you next time, not only the Articles 3 through 4, but also here is what I came up with to accommodate the changes that you said you wanted to have based on language. And so as a part of the next meeting, not only would you be getting the review of Articles 3 through 4, you would have in front of you actual language to effectuate whatever changes that you decide you want me to pursue here. We don't have to draft them here. All I need is the instruction that that's what you want to see, and then I'll put something together and bring it back to you.
Got it. Is Rob coming to this meeting?
No.
I think they're listening. I was told they were listening online.
They're in the booth.
How can I send you, I have a presentation that I would want to.
That I don't know.
Can I send it to you?
I told Kelly if we needed her, we'd call her. I'm calling you now because
Yeah,
we need
she's-
you.
Both of them are in the.
She's listening, so I think
Booth.
she'll come out and tell us.
Well, while we're waiting on her, any other questions from any other councilman?
Yes, sir.
My question is, once we make a decision here, whatever changes we want to make to the charter, then at what point does that go to the voters?
Okay. That is also a decision you all make, because let's suppose we have now completed the charter review. I've drafted all of the amendments. Y'all are in agreement. The next thing that happens is I put together an ordinance. The ordinance goes through 2 readings, and it will basically say we are submitting to the voters in whatever election you choose. That's part of the decision. The following questions, and this is the ballot title, this is the summary, and the copy of the actual amendments are attached. And so which election will depend on a couple of factors: how soon we get through, and the deadline, which will then be some new supervisor of elections office. I would have said Bill Cowles, but he's retiring soon. But whoever the SOE is, when we're done, will then give us a timeline. So let's assume we're talking about November of 2024. Their deadline to get on that ballot might be August 1. So we'd have to not only have a review completed, we'd have to have the ordinance adopted so we could submit everything to them by whatever their established deadline. It's usually several months in advance. As an example, to get on the presidential preference ballot, which is in August or in March of this year, you had to have everything to Bill's office by December 12th of last year. So I assume it'll be a similar lead time, but I don't know exactly when. once, I can certainly inquire, and I will, if you wanted to have it in November, when would it be? If you wanted to put it off to a different time, it's all going to depend on the election you choose, what the lead time will be.
And what percentage of the voters must vote to approve the change?
A majority, which is 50% plus one, of those who actually vote. It's not of all the voters, it's those who vote.
And it's only 50% plus one, even though it's a charter?
Yes, unless you change it. That's another thing, when we get to it, you could change. As an example, the state constitution now requires 60% because of, if you'll remember back to when this became an issue, the pregnant pigs problem. Apparently, people were concerned about pregnant pigs being mistreated and decided to get a petition, got it on the ballot, it got passed, and people said, this is ridiculous, this shouldn't be a constitutional amendment. And that's when the percentage went from 50% plus one to now 60%. I thought said she was listening, so I don't know where she's at.
Rob just emailed me to say that Kelly was going to come in with the presentation, so.
Any other questions, commissioners? I hear. I think I do.
She's coming. She's just not. She'll have it in here.
Thanks, Laura.
I had literally said, so if I need you, what I do, just scream? And she said, yeah, that'll work.
From an advertisement perspective, any potential change, high-level description that would be on the ballot, and you talked about the amendments that would support it, how would those be advertised for the public to be able to view those, to understand fully what that one ballot paragraph might insinuate?
Well, let me start by saying, you didn't think I was actually going to call you back in here, did you? What the fact of the matter is, in addition to what I'm about to tell you, it can be advertised anywhere or as much as you want. But legally, what's required is for you to simply do the same notice that would be required for calling an election and having the meeting on the ordinance. So that's the only legal requirement. But what that typically also means is because, and you will know this having voted in a number of elections, you never actually see on the ballot the actual language of the amendment. Instead, you see the title and the question, which is supposed to accurately summarize what the amendment says. If you want to see the actual amendment, you got to do a little extra work. So that can mean looking at it online if it's posted on the city's website, which I would presume, or coming to City Hall and physically reading it. Because the one place it won't be, unless you take it with you, is the voting booth of the ballot box. That where it won't be. Which seems a little weird because I know a lot of people don't get around to look into this stuff until they're actually there to vote, and then they only get the question. So and that's one of the reasons why there's such a stickler at the courts about, does the summary accurately depict what the amendment is trying to do, and why there's a lot of litigation that surrounds that topic. But at the same time, you're limited in the title to 15 words or less, and to the summary, 75 words or less. And when you've got an amendment that could be several hundred words long, if not 1,000 words long, depending on what you're trying to amend, that's not usually adequate for most folks, but that's the reality.
Got it. Okay. So at the end of the day, we just want to be able to educate them as much as possible.
Right.
And point them in the right direction. Okay.
It's chilly here.
Yeah. Is it just the, okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah, I mean, there's no secret, I've said it publicly, of my desire as it relates to Article 1 in this conversation. I'm fully cognizant of the fact that all of my comments here today will be construed as politically driven from the election that occurred in 2022. And that's fair. I mean, people can say that all day long. But we sit up on the dais of a city council, so we're all politicians here, so politics is politics. What I want to do first is just kind of remind folks that this concept of a charter review and a call to have the form of government change is not new. In fact, it happened 9 years ago in this very chambers when my predecessor for seat 4 had made a motion that failed 4-1 to elicit the attorney to give steps on how to do a charter review and how to change the form of government at that time from strong mayor to a city manager form of government. I just put this for reference because both sides of this coin can sit here and say wax politics, but we're here today to discuss the merits of discussing the form of government and the benefits that I see of change, as well as the drivers if we need to get to that section. Because if you'll notice the second snippet there, Commissioner Aerosmith does go into a great level of detail about the whys he felt the need to change the form of government at that time. I'm a visual person, so I like to put on a map of what we look like today. Our current form of government is a strong mayor form of government, as our charter dictates. At the top of that hierarchy is our residents. Our residents are our bosses. Then we have the city council. It's made up of us 5 up here that you see today, 4 commissioners and a strong mayor. Our charter precludes us, and the down arrows really kind of reflect our ability to influence staff at really any level. Our charter precludes us from giving day-to-day instruction, administrative instruction to any member of staff within the city of Apopka. The exception being is our interpretation, obviously previously, about the charter positions of the city attorney and the city clerk, but that's a discussion for a different article, Article 3, that we'll have in subsequent conversations. But at the end of the day, we set policy on this dais, and our strong mayor, Mayor Nelson, is responsible for really executing that day-to-day instruction with staff. He is the top of the food chain, the CEO of the city. The buck stops with Mayor Nelson. And that gives him a lot of power that us as commissioners, we don't have an equal playing field on this council. One member of this council has a greater authority than the remaining 4. So really our only intermediary is our city administrator. But again, we have no authority to give instruction to our administrator. We have the authority to communicate through him and for him to be a proxy for us to get responses back from our director level staff. Now, that's not to say that director level staff don't interact with us as commissioners. They do all the time. And there's a good relationship there. If there's a pothole that needs fixing, this happened just this week. Our public services staff did it within probably a 48-hour business day turnaround. Great. I didn't instruct them to do that. I just made them aware of the situation. But at the end of the day, the mayor instructs all of staff, absent us setting budgets and policies. If we were to go to a proposed form of government where you have a council city manager, what that looks like is, obviously the makeup of the council doesn't change, but we all become equal partners in this policy-making initiative. No one member of this city council has authority greater than the other. Then you have a clear designation between us and the city manager. And there's a distinction between administrator and city manager. But at the end of the day, the city manager will be that person that instructs and leads staff based off of the policies that this council has put forth. The benefits of this model, in my opinion, I've highlighted 5. You can probably list more. But a council and a city manager form of government has a few benefits. I'll start with skilled professional. A city manager is a hired professional executive with proven experience in large organizational structures and or other like-sized municipalities that has a strategic focus and the ability to develop and motivate staff. Executive is a key word. You can have experience, and I think other people have said this in the public realm, is when people run for a strong mayor in this form of government, there is no qualification listing. There is no things that a candidate has to qualify for other than the basic requirements of being a resident in the city of Apopka for a year and the other basic qualification requirements. Being able to hire a city manager, you are ensured that there's a skill set that comes with that professional. The second benefit is consistency. A professional who leads with business and management principles with full understanding of local, state, and federal laws. It's consistent in that the job that he or she plays is not driven by election cycles, right? In the city of Apopka, we're on a 4-year cycle. It further insulates staff from the council and uncertainty of the elected positions that we introduce. It gives some sort of consistency, assuming that that person is doing the right job. And it anchors politics at the dais in these chambers. At the end of the day, all the fighting, all the civil discourse, all of the back and forth politics occur here at the dais versus after the meeting's over, not knowing what's going to happen behind closed doors in the public services department when our strong mayor goes and gives different instruction than what we potentially would have collectively agreed to. Having that model make sure that it all sits here, and when we give instruction to a city manager, they're doing what they need to lead staff in the proper manner. The third benefit is the ability to pivot. If a selected city manager does not sufficiently perform in his or her duties, the council, and by extension the residents of Apopka, do not have to wait 4 years for another election to replace a weak leader. The city council would simply seek out a new qualified city manager. Other contracts have probably 60, 90-day lead time, depending on whether or not there's cause or not cause. But long story short, you're not waiting 4 years if you know today that you need to make a change. The budget and project execution. Having a city manager, there's a clear bifurcation of the setting side and the execution legs of the city budget. There's no ability for a singular member of the city council, and that right now is our strong mayor, to dictate the day-to-day execution of a collective council-approved budget. How many projects did we have that carried over into this fiscal year? What was the reason behind that? And then lastly, benchmarking and precedents. Why should we do something that is outside the norm in the state of Florida? Out of the over 400 municipalities, there may be 412 or 414, and it's some number over 400. 12% of those have a strong mayor form of government. Out of the 69 municipalities in Orange, Lake, Osceola, Seminole, Volusia, and Brevard counties, which we would commonly probably call a Central Florida area, only 6 have a strong mayor form. 4 of those 6 have populations less than 3,000. The other 2, Orlando and Apopka. My opinion is there's a Goldilocks zone of where it's appropriate to have a strong mayor, and Apopka is not one of them. It's for small municipalities with small populations or large municipalities with large population centers and large budgets to be able to satisfy many layers of executive organizational design. Those are my benefit statements. The next page is the key drivers, and this gets into the areas where I think there's deficiencies today, and really go to support why I think it's in the best interest of Apopka to make this change. Or said differently, at least for us as a council to collectively vote in majority to get this in front of Apopka voters to say, with all the facts that I have in hand, what's the right form of government for me today? First point, there's no strategic planning. There's none. There's not a strategic plan that exists for the city of Apopka. Right now, J. Angle Group is doing one for the fire department, but what's the fire department going to anchor themselves to organizationally or the enterprise? It doesn't exist. How do you run a city? How do you run a workforce of over 500 people if there's no strategic plan? How do you anchor your goals and objectives to people based off their performance to meet our strategic plan? Doesn't exist. The censure resolution, I know it's not popular, but it was passed. And publicly speaking, our mayor was censured for lying to this council. He's broken the public trust, and it's time to change course, as my predecessor in seat 4, Commissioner Aerosmith, said at the time of his proceeding. The handling of Southwick Commons, again, this is an example of the unilateral behavior of the current strong mayor. His administration set in motion a project that was counter to the spirit of the developers agreement that we have. After the court's decision against the city, the mayor decided to unilaterally represent a city position to try and kill the project without council awareness. Again, operating outside the spirit of our council unity. The handling of Rock Springs Ridge. He's led residents to believe, back on the day of the amphitheater presentation, that the city should be a tri-party deal broker in a matter between private entities, leading to constant misinformation, even today, resident frustration, and infighting. Unprofessional hiring tactics. The handling of Mr. Joe Abel's offer to serve as our next city administrator and the subsequent reneging of that offer by the mayor was egregiously unprofessional. You literally, in the public comment, sent an email to an applicant that you made an offer to and told them that you were reneging it because you talked to 3 other people that weren't listed as references and said that he would be a bad hire. Employee dissatisfaction. Employee engagement survey clearly says that there's frustration and direct leadership within the teams within the city. The handling of Mr. Austin Duran's line of duty death, combative nature, and challenging the acceptance of third-party findings aimed to help improve our fire department. Again, a unilateral challenging and lack of acceptance. Complete disregard and no confidence votes for key leadership positions within the city, where trust was lost by the majority of the council members. We did a no confidence vote on 2 occasions, and it was just deemed ceremonial in nature, which I think is the viewpoint of the commissioners that sit on this council. Staff turnover and the manner of termination. There's been certain terminations in this city where it was executed by resources that were not in the chain of command of the person being terminated, and or HR was not even present during the termination process, which is so out of norm when it comes to that sort of HR activity. Nay votes with no justification. Most recently, we had an example of the investment policy that was brought forth to this council, which we had been contemplating for over 10 months, well over 6 months. I don't know the exact date, but the mayor wanted to provide a quote to the media with all of the points against why he would vote for the investment policy, but yet not once did he verbalize those during any public proceeding as we were contemplating that investment policy. Unfulfilled department head positions. At one point before Dr. Patton was hired, we were without an HR director for 10 months. When your largest expense in a city out of your general expenditure or general expense fund is your people, that is highly problematic and risky if you don't have an HR director to lead your workforce. The economic development director, great that we're interviewing her this week and that she'll likely be on the next agenda, but it's been 12 months. There's no excuse. The city administrator, again, yes, we've got a headhunter that's starting their process, but again, it's just a history of not being able to go out and seek talent to be able to serve on this, serve this city. And I will argue to that end, because there's some candidates in the room right now, but we don't need to be kumbaya at this dais. We don't need to sit around a campfire at Camp Weewa and all sing each other's praises. The whole idea of being on a council is civil discourse, and it's to sharpen the point. So I don't think there's any kind of volatility up here that would preclude people from coming to work within this city, especially on HR director or economic development director position. The politicization of the mayoral salary. During his campaign, he wanted to artificially deflate the salary to a salary of $75,000 to run a staff of 500 people in a city of 75 or 50,000 people. And that's no secret. It's a common tactic used to make sure that you don't attract quality candidates that could be that executive that would demand a salary that was in place prior to that reduction. He also improperly abstained from that vote to increase his salary closer to the market rate. He had no right to abstain from that vote, yet he did. Unfulfilled promises at the state of the city, announcements that never came to fruition, many made for political gain. In fact, this latest state of the city, there was really no forward-looking statements, probably because we didn't want to fall into that trap. Procedural missteps. I mean, we just recently had to reapprove the council budget because the proper procedures were missed. The CRA board and the council are going to have to reconvene on the Station Street project, which again, all the t-shirts will readorn our council chambers here because there was a lack of procedure. There was a procedural misstep. We have to do that whole process over again. I could go on and on. But this, I don't know how this doesn't scream off the page that we need to have some timeout from a lack of trust on this council that what we say as a council is actually going to be executed. And there's just proof that that's not going to happen. There's proof that the current strong mayor values his position and the power that he wields in a way that's irresponsible. So that's my piece. That's why I think it's appropriate. I think there's enough backstory there for us to put that on a ballot for our voters to consider.
Anybody else? Hey, Cliff?
I only need to know whether or not there's sufficient interest, which would mean I could count heads of at least 3 people who are saying, yeah, we want to see more. And then I will make changes, at least to these 2 articles, that are consistent with the idea. So you'd see what they would look like. Ultimately, the decision on what goes on the ballot is going to come back to you in the form of the ordinance. So for our purposes today, whether it's this issue or anything else, it really is about, regardless of the past, do you think going forward it's a good idea or not a good idea to give the voters the final say? And so, and again, ultimately, even if we get through the whole thing and you decide on certain things, you can change your mind and say, yeah, I don't want to send that to the voters. A recent example, this issue, i.e. council manager versus strong mayor, and for arguably some of the same reasons, was brought up and was thought to be almost a foregone conclusion that that was going to be how things ended in the town of Eatonville. But after due consideration and most importantly, after significant citizen input, council, I think, voted, it was either 5-0 or 4-1 to leave it alone. So I don't know where this will end up. But that's what happens. So if you want me to bring, if there's enough interest to continue down the road, then I will make some changes and you'll see them. And you'll see them for each successive section as to where they would need to be made to effectuate that change. Unless I get ahead of myself, and if I do, I'll get them to you even sooner. But that's all I need to know for today's purposes. Is there sufficient interest to go down the road of drafting? And if there is, I'll draft. So that's all I'm looking for any of these sections today.
Well, clearly I'm one.
I got one. I count.
Why don't we go through, why don't we do this, Cliff? Why don't
And
we go
then
through
come to the end?
Why don't we go through maybe not to the end, why don't we go through the first, and then we'll take
first
public
article?
comment, and then
Okay.
we'll go to the second.
And that's fine. And also, I would point out too, as I mentioned earlier, but I don't think that the audience here might have heard or not, might need a refresher. We also will have, as meetings, parking lot issues. So even if we're not sure where we are landing on this one and we want to hear more public input, that could be something that is moved to the parking lot with additional notice. Hey, we're going to specifically discuss this today. If you want to come participate and give us a lot of input from the public, this would be a kind of thing where you could do that also. So, yeah, but with that in mind, let me, I need to get the clicker.
Hey, Kelly.
Thank you. All right. So the next section, I wouldn't expect any changes, but it's 101.02, corporate boundary. I have had this question, so I'm going to go ahead and answer it. It's actually answered in the wording of the amendment itself, which was, well, what about all the annexations and this doesn't contain them? And actually, in your chart, in some charters, there's an actual long legal description, but it's 30 years old. Your second paragraph here answers the question, all ordinances of annexation of the city heretofore adopted and as may be adopted prior to the effective date of this charter are hereby incorporated and the lands described in such and such. So automatically, you don't have to change your charter. Your boundaries are changed as soon as you pass and adopt an annexation ordinance and send it to the county. So that's how that's done. So unless y'all have anything for this section, there's nothing to change. Okay. Section 1.03, wait a minute, let me go back. I thought it was more than one. 103, general powers of the city. This is a general statement that you have all the powers that the state of Florida gives you. as a home rule city. And because that's very typical, and I assume you don't want to limit your powers, I had no reason to suggest changes for this section. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, because it says they were specifically enumerated in this charter to enable it to conduct municipal government. All right, so the question that I received today was, with the legislation up in Tallahassee, kind of, they used the word eroding, that was the word that
Oh,
they
they're
used.
eroding home rule, yes.
Right. Is there any way for our city charter to enumerate the actual powers that we govern by, so that if it changes with Tallahassee, and they did say maybe an attorney response, would that preclude us from following what Tallahassee is changing as far as home rule? Or do we continue with what we have established as a home rule?
Well,
Did you understand
yeah,
that?
I do.
Okay.
In essence, is there any way that we can prophylactically keep the legislature from messing with us? And the answer is no. Because having a city at all based on a charter, which we do, is governed by state statute, which is controlled by the legislature. And as I have opined, perhaps arguably preached to anybody who will listen, they have listening ears when they're running for office, but they don't have listening ears when they're in office. And home rule, it's undeniable factually that it's being eroded every time they meet in Tallahassee. They're taking away rights for you to govern yourselves locally the way you'd like to. But what this provision says is that you have all governmental, corporate, proprietary powers possible for a city to have under the Constitution laws of the state of Florida. So there's nothing else you can ask for that you don't already have, but there's a lot of stuff you'd like to keep that Tallahassee tries to keep taking away. And that's where we are. So there's nothing I can do to give you more power nor to protect the power you have. I would love to be able to say, for example, that we are seizing the power that we have and nothing in Tallahassee matters. But unless they change the state constitution, that's not true.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions about this section?
Well, no, the constituent who did ask me that is tuning in, so you've answered that question, which was presented to me.
I so wish it was possible to stop what's happening, but I can't do it. Not through this anyway. Section 1.04 is construction, and again, I see no reason to change this. It just basically says that we're going to construe whatever powers we have liberally in favor of us, the city. So whatever power we have, it will be construed by us and by the courts interpreting it in our favor if there's any inconsistency or incongruity, so long as it's otherwise constitutional. That's what that provision says. So I didn't find any reason to change any of that. This then goes to Article 2, so if we want to stop.
Yeah, let's stop. Anybody want to speak to Article 1?
Right.
Okay.
All
Any
right.
public
So
comment?
all I
okay,
need to
Jay.
know is, right now, and maybe this is going to come down later, because by the way, even if it's today, I'm not getting head bobs to go down the road. That doesn't mean it won't happen at the next meeting or in the parking lot or whenever. So that's okay. This doesn't have to, all I need to know is whether you want to see language before the next meeting or during the next meeting, or you want to wait until to see how the whole thing fleshes out. That's up to you guys.
So right now, there's no public comment
So,
for.
Mr. New, did you want to talk now, or you want to wait? Okay.
That's what I just said. This is on just Section 1, so Article 1, I mean. Yeah,
Yes.
Article 1.
Well, he's pointing to 2. Go back to 1.
Okay.
Oh, so we have public comment.
We're going to do it. We're going to split it. We're gonna do the
Article 1 or Article 2?
one. Article 1 or Article 2? Article 2, we're going to wait until after we get done with Cliff Shepherd's presentation.
Just for clarification on Article 1.
Can you speak just a little louder? Okay.
Well, I don't think the button's not pressed on your,
Is it on?
Oh,
There we go.
there we go. Okay. All right. So just for clarification,
Name and address for the,
I'm sorry?
name and address for
Nikki
the record.
McGuire?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. just for clarification on Article 1 and the other articles that's just going to follow. So we're the public, we're here for this meeting. So for Article 1, I see you're moving on to Article 2. Do we have to wait for council to make a decision before we get to say whether we want the change? No, I understand we have to vote on it when it becomes to the election, but
No, this is your time to do. So we're taking comment right now on Article 1, then we're going to collectively talk as a council for the Article 2. But if you have comments on Article 1, yeah.
so this is our time to make a
Yes.
suggestion as to
Well,
what type we
We're going
would
to
like.
have other opportunities down
Yeah,
the road.
there'll
so
be
this
more
isn't
than
the only
more
one, so-
opportunities as well, including when
Yeah.
the ordinance is drafted, there'll be hearings on that
Yes.
as well.
Right, but then if we do an Article 1 now, and then later on, Dr. Broad, say if I miss the next meeting, then I lose my opportunity, or
No,
can
you-
it be?
You have.
No, you're fine.
While we
You
have
have-
these workshops, you can go back to Article 1 or Article 2. But right now, we've done Article 1, and we're
Okay.
just kind of testing the waters now. We're done, do we have public comment? If we're doing Article 2 and you remember that maybe you wanted to have an input about Article 1, you're free to also come up and have a comment on it.
Okay, so Article 1 is not being closed as of right now?
No, it's a
Okay.
long way off. Yeah,
So
you're good.
basically, the only kind of decision that we're going to be making today is kind of a thumbs up or thumbs down decision to say, do we have any appetite as a council to explore this further? If we were to say thumbs up, yeah, let's explore doing the form of government change, Mr. Shepherd would go back and start drafting language on what the ballot language would look like and what amendments that would support that ballot initiative would have to be, because there's other parts below in other articles that would be impacted by if you made the decision to go to city manager. But at this stage, we're not talking to that level of detail yet. It's more about, do we want to proceed and instruct Mr. Shepherd to go forward with this idea?
Okay, perfect. And just for clarification, I'm asking on behalf of someone who's not here and text me the question. So, all right, thank you very much. I appreciate you guys.
And
So Dennis,
and
you
whoever texts
you on
you,
Article 1 or
please-
you Article 2?
Please let them know
Wait till we
that,
get done with Article. Come on.
okay.
I'm sorry, she was speaking.
I just wanted to
Eric
respond to
Mock.
Nikki first. Can I respond to her quickly?
Okay,
Thank
you can email me.
No, she's not. If they're texting you, please let them know that they can also email any of the commissioners here with a question. And we will have it up here and we'll research it, or we'll answer it while we're discussing up here.
Thank you.
I don't want our residents to feel if they're not present, then their voices are not being heard.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Eric. And Dennis, you might just sit down because he's going to go ahead and go over Article 2 and then we'll public comment.
Eric Mock, 2439 Verde View Drive here in Apopka, Florida. Attorney Shepherd.
Yes, sir.
Mayor and commissioners, thank you for the opportunity. I had a quick question for Commissioner Becker. In your presentation, you mentioned two cities that currently here in Central Florida do not have a commission structured. They still have mayor, Apopka being one and Orlando.
The other one is Eatonville.
And okay, three,
There
Eatonville.
was 6 total.
Yep, right.
Right.
And there was small ones that were 3,000, et cetera. Other than Apopka and Orlando, were not 3,000 in population.
Right, right.
My question for you, Commissioner Becker, when you did that and you were looking at that, what was your determining thought process as to why Orlando? You kind of made mention because of the size and the size of the budget is kind of the cut point determining factor. Was I hearing that correctly? Or,
Yeah, my thought process there is, the larger the city, when you have a strong mayor, you can wrap yourself around with the organizational structure required to manage a city of that size.
Okay.
Right now, the mayor has a team of, 6 or 7 department heads or directors. And the influence that he has on there right now, and again, not to rehash the last slide of my presentation,
No.
but it's just on the smaller side, the ones that are sub 3,000, maybe even sub 5,000 or 10,000, you have a very small intimate city where you just have that one person leading the charge. But on the larger scale, like Orlando has, I forget what their population was, like 275 or something officially. But whether it be Jacksonville or some of these other larger ones that have strong mayor forms of government, you have the right level of org designer hierarchy to be able to manage staff properly.
Okay. And I know that Attorney Shepherd made mention, or you made mention of something that he quoted about doing periodic reviews, in that process of a city charter. And my thought is, at one point, our population was 20,000. Today, we're essentially 60,000. Within probably 5 to 7 years, we're going to be 85,000, and I would guess to say 90,000. And so, while certainly charter review is appropriate over a period of time, I think it also is helpful if there's some built-in, if I call it strata, 50,000 it's this, 60,000 it's this, 70,000, because at some point, Orlando wasn't 256,000. And so in that, being able to govern and manage appropriately, I think I understand what your point was. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, Cliff, Article 2.
Okay, Article 2. All right, so this first one is one that this was actually came to me, and it may be that I'm the only person who's ever made this mistake, although I doubt it. And that is that we call ourselves a city council, but we call each of you commissioners. And so that has always struck me is if you're a city council, then you're city council members. And if you're a city commission, then you're city commissioners. And you are both of those things. And so if you would like to consider, this is it's lighthearted, but it also is a mistake that I know it's made because I've made it, where that the composition of the body as a council or commission is also the title that you carry. This would be where that change could be made. And so you'll see I've highlighted council and I've given you options where if you decided this was something you were interested in.
Your time's out.
He's being trying to be funny.
Okay, that's okay.
The time went out.
I don't do funny, I'm a lawyer. So if you wanted to do the council member thing, then you see that the first change would be a mayor and 4 city council members shall constitute the city council. And if you wanted to do the commission thing, it would be a mayor and 4 city commissioners shall constitute the city commission. And that this is something that, again, as I mentioned, I assume has happened more than once, and I cannot be the only one, but if I am, then I'll just wear the dunce cap over here. And I at least wanted you to have the opportunity to consider it, which is why it's here.
My only feedback on this, because obviously as we go through the articles of the charter, there could be a lot that we say, yeah, this is something that we want to take forward. But like something like this is more of if we're not debating the number of commissioners on the city council, if we're just like the titling
Just the
change,
titles.
then how much is too much on a ballot of potential charter
Great
agreements,
question. Here's what I have seen. There is an appetite typically early on to say, we don't want too much, we don't want voter overload or ballot overload, et cetera, et cetera. You get up to 5, 6, 7 questions, that's too much. Maybe we should split it up between this election and the next election. And then as we get, this is my experience, as we get to the finish line, people say, just let's throw it all out there. I don't care which way you go. And so what's too many is if they complete the ballot, then it's not too many. If they don't complete the ballot, you can argue, at least for that voter, that it's too many. But you could also argue that they just didn't care about the charter. So it's hard to know is the only answer they can come up with. I do think that if you get, down to 8 to 10 questions, you're probably getting heavy because generally people who don't understand or don't want to take the time to understand or just get tired of reading are going to say no just because. And so that's really kind of the magic sweet spot, but nobody who's ever sat in this chair can tell you where that is. Now they can have opinions and they might say anything more than 4 is too many, or anything more than 6 is too many, or anything more than 8 is too many, or they might say anything more than 3 is too many. I don't know. My suggestion is as we get to the end and you see how complicated the questions are, like let's use the city council manager thing versus strong mayor. If y'all ultimately decide, let's let the voters decide that, because the thing that needs to be remembered in all this is what y'all say gets it on the ballot, but what they say is what gets it in or out of the charter. And so that amendment, if you were to say, let's let the voters have something to consider, if they actually read the text, it's going to be long because a lot of sections are going to be affected and have to be changed to accommodate that form of government. And you could argue just that one alone should be one election. You could make that argument. But at the end of the day, if that's not something that goes forward, the others would probably be pretty short unless, for example, we have to spend some time, because one of the things I think is coming up, I don't know if it's in this one or the next one, is whether you want to implement term limits. And I've heard debates on all sides of this, and I've seen it start on one side, yes, term limits, and by the end, no term limits. So I don't have a preference. I'm just telling you that's how it sometimes goes. So I don't know the right amount of questions. I wouldn't worry about it now. I'd get to the end, exploring all the things, and then when we get the list, and then if you decide, let's pare it down. These are the most priority based. Let's have these first. We can do that. If you say, you know what, when I look at it, it doesn't seem like that much to me. Let's do them all. We can do that too. Ironically, and I say this just as a matter of historical fact that has nothing to do with Apopka, which makes me very happy. In the charters that I have reviewed in the last multiple years, I've only had 2 proposed amendments fail. And it will make you laugh, I think, as to what failed. In each of those charters, which you don't have this problem, were old enough charters where every position was a he. The mayor, he. The city manager, he. He. So they were gender specific. And so the proposal was based on the council to make it gender neutral. So instead of he, you'd either do a he/she or say just the commissioner will or the manager will without any reference to gender whatsoever. And they failed and those were the only amendments that failed because the voting public, which gives you some level of sometimes the amount of understanding of why these things are there, thought somehow this was an embracement of a transgender policy or something, when it was really just trying to make the charter neutral as to who gets to serve, whether it's men or women or whatever. That's the point. And so the other amendments typically, if they're well considered by the council, in my experience, have passed whatever they are. Because as you are showing, there's going to be a lot of discussion, debate, and consideration amongst you all. The public will participate. There'll be several meetings, and then you'll have the ordinances, which they'll have an opportunity to come and talk about it again. So where you end up, it really, where we start today does not necessarily mean that's where we'll end up. And so I would wait until then to figure out whether you want to narrow the list of questions.
On this particular one, I mean, it's obviously this is probably the lowest of low priorities because it's just
Sure,
titling. And
but it
there's
just
no-
happens to be where it falls in the
And
review.
there's no repercussions of how we're titled and the incongruency of
No.
council versus commissioner. Now, what I would say is that like in Article 202, there's evidence of both titles, right? You've got
Yes.
commissioners and council members. And
Yes.
so in a case like that, that wouldn't have to go to the public for voting if we just say, hey, we were cleaning up titling to say, really where it says council members, it should have said commissioners. I mean,
Well, it would be a situation in which we would put in there, if there's some more things like this as we get through it, then that would be all in like shall the charter be amended to make language consistent regarding the titles of commissioners / council members or something like, and it would be included amongst a list of other things. If there were typos that need to be corrected, if there's other things like that. And that would be one question. Shall all the typos in the charter be corrected?
Yeah.
And, things of that nature. So that's how that would go.
So in through this process, just tonight and obviously in meetings after this, what's our goal? Are we trying to have dialogue on each section right now, or are we waiting to go through both sections and then have public comment and then we all have dialogue about this? What is everyone's goal? Because I just want to make sure I understand, because I have a lot of questions or a lot of topics to bring up, but I don't want to slow anybody else down either if that's not our goal to do it in that capacity.
As envisioned by me, it would be to take each section, and if you have no comment about it, okay. And if you have a comment, let me know so I can contemporaneously say, okay, they're interested in me amending this section, come up with some language that they can take a look at and see what it looks like. But that doesn't have to be the way it goes. That's just how it's envisioned by me. So in theory, if we got through Article 2, and right now I don't have any direction that's, tells me to do anything else, I've got nothing to draft except the next set of, next memo on Articles 3 and 4. However, if we get through the end of Article 2 and y'all have had a consensus, hey, we'd like to see an amendment and what it looks like on this topic or that topic or the other, then I'll start putting together the language.
Well, if we can we go back to 1, let's have dialogue up here for that, and then officially move over to 2, unless there is no comment. Because we
That's
didn't
up
get
to
like a head nod or a yes or a no to move forward, and I'd like to
Okay.
close that out, not close it out because it could come back up
It's
next
gonna
week
come
week after
back,
that.
yeah.
But I just want,
Okay.
let's do it very systematically, if that's okay. So in reference to and I'll run with it for now. I think, obviously, I haven't had anybody reach out to me and say, no, we want to keep it exactly the way it is. We are not interested in exploring different forms of government at all. Most people that reach out to me are interested in a manager form of government. So I represent the people. That's what I would like to see that language go forward. The only question or comment that I would like to say is that, Commissioner Becker, you made a lot of points of one specific mayor. If you had a visionary in that seat, that power could go a long way and do a lot of good. So there's a balance there to do that. And that's all I'm saying. But it's for the people. And so I've not heard one person say they don't want to explore a manager form of government. So that is a yes for me to move forward on that. But obviously I'm open to everyone else on that front.
And I can come back and take a tally at the end if you want, so we can continue through Article 2. That's up to you. All I'm looking for is, my goal here is to get direction on what you want to see next from me. Because you're going to get a memo on 3 and 4 regardless. The question is, what else do you want in the next session? And then, as I said, the council manager thing is a perfect example of something that may best, in terms of final decision-making, left to the parking lot meeting. Because then you're devoted to a specific topic. Everybody can come with their guns loaded, if you want to call it that, or just basically prepared better to say, hey, here's what the pros are, here's what the cons are, and I can answer whatever questions that you put to me before you get down to, yeah, let's go ahead and bring that forward as a part of the ordinance. That's up to you guys. And there may be stuff there's stuff that isn't necessarily going to be brought up by me that I can't predict, that you guys may have to come up, that the council, the members of the public may bring up, and you say, that sounds like a good idea, let's stick it in there. That's fine. That's what's anticipated.
Well, that's what I think. Let's go systematically. If we want to see something up here on 1, let's close that out and say, yes, we want to see something moving forward. And then we can move on to 2, because I have different topics of conversation on Article 2 as well. So
So right now, as to the council manager thing, I only have 2 nods of the head, let's see some language. So without a third, at least for now, that's where we are. But if you want to start seeing that stuff, and again, you could make that decision next time or anytime.
I don't know that we need to, I'm fine. If y'all want to do it, let's do it. I'm okay with that. I don't know why we don't wait. We get more
it's
input
up to you
along the
guys.
way before we come back and say, I've got overwhelming response. I want to change this or change that, or I don't. I know y'all wanted to put that on the ballot, but you get no, response from the community that they want to do that.
And you'd be surprised, like I said.
Yeah.
I don't know what the community at large will or won't say. I do know that shockingly, and that's why it changed the course in Eatonville, that when the community did speak, it was don't change. So I don't know what's
So
going to happen.
here's my rebuttal to that comment.
Then do it. Okay, put it on there.
Sir, why don't you just listen to my rebuttal first and then respond to the rebuttal? This is your childish antics up here that I'm growing tired of. Just let me speak and then respond to what I have to say, like an adult. The point being is, again, we can wait, kick the can. We've advertised this. There's people sitting in this room. There's not going to be any more driver of people reacting to something is if we say 3 or 4 or 5 to say head nod, yeah, can you start drafting stuff for our form of government change, section 101?
and this finalizes nothing
Nothing.
at all.
Now, when that's published in the Apopka Chief or the Apopka Voice and it says council has done a head nod to say, hey, they're going to explore doing a form of government change, then the mayor might have more people that support his stance come in these chambers and voice opposition, which we would definitely want to hear. But to sit here and say, oh, well, let's wait for another meeting, and then what happens if there's less people in this room?
Again,
Right,
I'm just
that's
looking for direction.
rhetorical, right?
I get it.
But So
I think it'd be beneficial, Commissioner Smith and Commissioner Velasquez, I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts as well.
Well, my comment is that there's always advantages and disadvantages. Commissioner Becker presented some benefits, but he didn't present anything as far as disadvantages. And the other thing is that it seems that the comments was directed at the person that's currently sitting in the seat. So what happens if we get another person in the seat? Are we going to come back and change the charter again so we have a strong form of government? I may decide to be the mayor one day. So are we going to change it again so that I can be a strong mayor? So I just don't see, you got to show both sides of the aisle. Where there's benefits, there's also disadvantages as well. So we need to see both sides.
No, completely fair point. I just have to, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't predict the future. I have to deal with what is presented to me right now. And again, I put the list up there, the benefits, the drivers behind my decision. And yeah, there may be some cons to that. I would love to hear those, and let's debate those cons. I don't hear any specifics yet, but I would love to debate those. But the fact of the matter is, what happens if, again, we don't have any term limits, what happens if the current mayor is reelected for perpetuity? Don't know. And hey, that's honestly, we have an apathetic voter base. I mean, quite honestly, when you have an electorate that only turns out 20% of the folks, it's kind of hard for us to feel like we're ever going to get a true consensus polling of our residents. And so at the end of the day, they've elected all 5 of us to sit in the seat and advocate on the positions that we interact with those residents with. Like my experiences are more in line with Commissioner Nesta, where I have not received an email personally or an advocating on behalf of not doing the direction that I've described here. And again, all of the things I've put on paper, I've got the facts to back it up. So it's not like it's not conjecture or my opinions. Each one of those things I can prove. And so I have to make a decision right now based off of what we are currently faced with. And I think there's a lot more benefit to having a city manager run things. That way the politics, as much as possible, stays up here on the dais. A lot of the cities that are in this immediate vicinity have that same form of government, and they're thriving.
Well, my rebuttal would be that if the voters, those that are concerned and those that take the time and interest come out and vote, re-elected our mayor, then that means that they have the confidence in the mayor to perform the duties of the city. So to say, let's redo the charter because of a individual, I mean, people's vote matters. And so I've only received one phone call with someone not necessarily saying, let's change the form of government. That person just simply saying, put it on the ballot and let the people decide. But nobody else has said anything about the way the current form of government is operating.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with the person who says, let's put it on the ballot and let the people decide.
Okay, so that leaves me. So, I've always, for me, city management, government has been a new government process for me, moving to Florida. I've always dealt with a strong mayor government. And my advice has been to those constituents who have asked me personally, what do I would consider, I tell them not to base their decision to change our form of government based on the current leadership. Because the city of Apopka has always been a strong mayor form of government. And it's been unique because for most of those who have been lifelong residents of Apopka, you had one mayor. only in the last 10 years have you had a change of government. You had 4 years of, Mayor Joe Kilsheimer. That was the first time in over 61 years that there was a change in the council and with the mayor. And I experienced that because I was one of those commissioners that came in following a very long reign in Apopka. And I can tell you from my own experience, it wasn't easy. It was a lot of challenges because it was a big change for the residents in the city of Apopka. They were just used to one mayor, and that was it. And when I ran in 2014, this was I can tell you the experiences, which I've rarely shared with anyone, but I won with only 512 votes. At that time, that told me, as they've been saying, is the apathy of voters. I don't know if over 60 years, the residents just got used to that, the mayor was in charge. He was in charge of the city. Now, back then in 2014, I believe our residents were probably about 26,000. 10 years later, we're almost up to 60,000. So we have a lot of new families, residents, businesses. They all come with different ideas. And I think they're frustrated because they feel that as much as we want to put things forward to kind of change and grow, because change comes organically. It doesn't come because you get different electors up here. It just changes because as the city grows, there's a demand from the voters. They're the first ones on top. They are expecting growth. They're expecting, businesses to come into the city. They're expecting their government to serve them. That's what they're used to. I don't know what's right, if it's a strong mayor or if it's city management at this point, because we've never had city management. I follow other cities that have city manager form of government, and I see some of the downside from that also. I'll give you an instance where I am following a particular city with a city management form of government. And I mean, we even experienced it here when the majority of the dais had lost confidence in our city attorney. We were unable to remove him. And in other cities where I've seen where there's a city manager form of government, I'm seeing where the residents weren't happy with their city manager, but the council was happy with the city manager. So they couldn't get the council to remove their city manager. And so since I'm unfamiliar with the city manager form of government, I am going to rely on the residents to make that decision. Personally, I don't want our form of government to change based on the current leadership. Let us work and set our council up for success for future, because we're not going to really affect us right now in doing this. Maybe it'll change for some of us that are still here, but let's set up a form of government. So as our city, as it is growing, it's growing every year, let's set up a government that's going to be successful in serving our city, and the residents have to be the ones to decide that at this point. But again, in 2014, we were only about 25,000. Most were all residents that have been lifelong Apopkans. So think about this. Over 40,000 new residents have come into our city. They all come from different forms of government. And I believe in some of the cities that they come from, the big cities, you know, up north, Midwest, it's always been a strong mayor that runs their city.
So what are you saying? When you said let the residents decide,
That the residents decide, once we do this city charter review, we will be able to share with and educate our residents how we run our city.
but if we don't instruct our attorney to draft
No,
potential
I want him
language-
to, yeah, he should, you know, give us both sides.
I
Give
understand.
us what it's like to be a city manager form of government. We already know what we have as a strong mayor government. We have that right now.
I can
there's-
provide the language, but I promise you, and this is not trying to advocate one way or the other, because I truly do not have a preference or care, nor should I. If I did, you should fire me. But what I will tell you is, for every example of this is a disappointing form of government because of what our experience has been, there's an equally bad story of the council manager form. So no form of
Yes.
government is perfect, which is the bottom line. It's only as good as the people in the positions. And I will point out this, which you'll see later, is that if there is a specific problem with this form of government, like the city attorney thing, that can be addressed as a separate issue from changing the whole form of government. It just deals with how you deal with the city attorney or the city clerk or whoever else. You can make changes that are not wholesale changes, but address a specific problem. So all of those are on the table depending on what you tell me you want to see.
Well, no, I think it's fair that if you can give us a city manager form of government.
I can let you look at what the language will be,
Right,
sure.
I want to see what that's like, because honestly, I've only dealt with a strong mayor form of government. And,
problem.
you know, the city of Apopka, that's all they've ever had. And the experience here, which has been very unique, of any city that I've seen, I've never seen a city run for 60 years with one mayor.
It's the only one in Florida. And I have no problem getting the language. And again, it's not where we may necessarily end up, but we can certainly explore what it looks like, and I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
But
Can I
in
just
order
make
to
a
keep
remark?
up,
Just a quick, not rebuttal, but just I want to address a couple of points that were made. You know, if we always do what we've always done, you know,
Right.
Mr. Olson, you know, we can't have that mindset. I mean, we have to, you know, you wouldn't advise us to review the charter every 5 to 7 years if we always thought it was going to stay in its current form for perpetuity. And I would argue that the best time to understand whether or not we want to change our form of government is when it's being run in a manner that's not how we would want it run. I mean, how many times have you sat in the seat and said, Mayor, how come we weren't made aware of something? Or how come we haven't been advised of this? Hello, he is the head of staff. Those decisions, you know, maybe accidental, I don't know. And to Commissioner Smith's points too on the reelection, yeah, the electorate reelected the mayor, but I would say half of the things I listed on my piece of paper have happened after that election. So who knows what the temperature of our electorate would be right now after we lost a firefighter, after the shenanigans that were done within the Southwick Commons that we're currently being sued for. I mean, so who knows what the electorate headspace is right now. And in fact, I'll point out an observation as well, because Orange County Commission Charter Review is happening right now as well. One of the things that they're contemplating is removing the voting rights of Mayor Demings to remove the kind of conflict when you have an executive that's also part of a legislative body. And so really, and in fact, that's what we're doing here. We're eliminating an executive from a legislative body, and we're hiring an executive to run our city. Leave all the legislative policymaking up here. Let the executive city running be done by a professional.
Yeah,
And I think that's totally worthy of us giving a head nod and a thumbs up to say, Mr. Shepherd, please draft language so that we can see what it would look like, because we can't educate the public unless we have those specifics.
no, I got it.
All right.
No problem. I'll bring
So,
that forward.
yes.
But also, if you don't mind me saying so, given the fact that I told you should do this in 2 hours or less, and I got some more sections to go, let me
Yep, we got-
power through.
Yep.
All right.
I mean, but
so-
also, and I just want to say this too, I said this from the beginning, I don't want to rush through any of this. So this was an important conversation to have.
It
I don't
is,
want
no
to
question.
minimize that at all.
It is probably the most important
And
conversation.
and the things coming up too are going to be important too. So although we are on a time crunch, I also don't want to rush this.
Okay. All right, so on this one, I'm going to assume that for right now, we'll come back to it. Because I didn't see a let's do it or let's not, and it doesn't really matter. This is just something I wanted to put for you because here's an opportunity.
Are you talking about this one now?
That yes, this is the one with council versus commissioner, and whether you want to make them consistent, you don't have to. It's just something I wanted to put in front of you.
Well,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
just quickly, again, I want to comment on all this. That's the point of these, is that I do think we need to build some consistency in here. Pick one side, doesn't matter, just we need to be consistent. The other one was, do we have any care of adding or removing the amount of commissioners we have? Do we want one more, two more, three more, five more? Or do we want less, or do we want to keep it the same?
No, I actually have gotten I think 3 phone calls where they're saying it's time to increase the representation of commissioners. In fact, I was given where rather than districts, because we hear a lot of conversation about districts, but the last 2 constituents that called me said, why don't we just break the city up in quadrants and have a commissioner that lives in each quadrant and then 2 at large, because they suggested 6 commissioners. So I said that I would bring that forward. That was a consideration.
I can at least comment on that. I
Okay.
can't comment it from an educated position because I don't know how your population is sparsed out. But generally, districts or quadrants would be based on population. And the reason why that's an important consideration for at least to you to think about is because you could have a quadrant that has 10,000 people, and you could have a quadrant that has 5,000 people, and you have a quadrant that has 40,000 people. And if you will by quadrants, they would now have equal representation, which is not equal exactly. And so that is why when districts are done and districts are redone for purposes of representation, it's by how many voters are in that area. And that's why you have these maps that are squiggly and go all over the place. Assuming they're not being politically gerrymandered, it's try to make sure that you have roughly the same amount of people in each district that are voting so that they have roughly the same amount of representation on the council. A different way to provide additional voices to the commission or council, whichever you guys end up with, is to have at-large seats. As it currently sits, you have 4 districts and 1 at-large mayor, meaning everybody gets to vote for the mayor. If your district votes for you and yours for you and so forth, that's the way it goes. If you wanted to add representation, you could have, in addition to districts, you could have additional at-large seats. I'm not sure exactly what the numbers are, but I think Mount Dora has a couple of at-large seats, maybe in addition to the mayor, and then 4 seats that are by districts. So that's a different way to add representation, which doesn't depend on population. And the reason at-large is a significant change or difference between the two is because that person has to stand for election in front of everybody, just like the mayor would. Whereas a district person typically only runs for the people who are in their district. But that's again, if that's on the table, if you want to consider increasing size, you have a couple of different ways to go.
Okay, so I mean, I did get from constituents, because some have called me or text me. I mean, I've had constituents say that they're happy with the way we are elected and represent them, that we basically are not districts and we are citywide.
Yeah, you're at large.
Right, at large. I've had both sides.
And again, that it would, when you would see that change is if all of a sudden everybody's coming out of, what's a good name? Rock Springs. If all 5 of you were out of Rock Springs, you'd probably say, well, we think maybe we need some districts, you know.
Right.
But if you already had districts, but you still wanted to increase, then you could have more at large. So it really depends on what it is that you're trying to achieve. And if it's just additional representation, you can just add a couple of seats, but it doesn't mean there'll be necessarily more representation of an area than there is today, because it depends on who runs and where they're from.
Right, and that's always been what I've said. We may all kind of live in Rock Springs Ridge, but when it's open, when the election comes, where you can go file, anyone can file. If we're all coming from Rock Springs Ridge, it's not because it's done that way, it's just.
Sure. That happened to be the name that came to my mind when I was trying to think, okay, let me think of subdivisions that I know. So I wasn't trying to pick on
It
Rock
is.
Springs. I was just trying to quickly come up with something I could remember.
Well,
Is
we
there
do live
interest in
there.
increasing from 5 to some other number? Let's start with that.
That has been a conversation where they feel as the city is growing that we need to add a commissioner.
Okay, well, the commissioner would take you to 6, which means an even number, which is never good. So if you go to 1, you need to go
With 2.
arguably to 2. So at least you have an odd number in case of ties. Is there interest in adding a couple of commissioners, in whatever process, is there an interest in adding a couple of commissioners and seeing what that looks like?
Can you give us some feedback on that from other cities as to how many residents are per
Well,
commissioner?
It is very rough for me to say this because I don't know the current population, although we do represent Mount Dora again. I don't know their current population. But they're the only council that I currently represent, and I temporarily am the city attorney for Jacks Beach also, so that's an exception. But on a permanent level, we represent Mount Dora, and they're a 7-member council. And they function, as I mentioned. They have 4 district council people, 2 at large, and the mayor is always at large. And so that's how they function, and their population is certainly less than 20,000. I think it may be less than 18, but I don't know. I haven't checked the numbers recently. But that's Mount Dora. Most councils are like yours, 5. But also, depending on where you are, some are by district, with only the mayor being an at-large. And some are where all the commissioners, if it's on a council manager, more common thing is if they're all at large, they're all at large, and the mayor then is selected amongst the council themselves. And it can even rotate, well, I'll be the mayor this year and you'll be the mayor next year, because it's a ceremonial position who sits in the center and runs the meetings. But then it stands, like in Maitland, it's not got a more powerful position, but it is a separate position and it's not included in their term limits. So if I served 2 terms as a council member, I would be term limited out unless I wanted to turn around and run for mayor, and I could serve for 2 more terms if I could get elected as mayor. So there's all kinds of various permutations. And within those permutations, you can add districts in or you don't have to. It's really what you want. I just need to be directed as to which way you want me to draft.
I don't know if that's a real important thing right now.
Okay?
What do you think,
Well,
adding commissioners or?
I've always thought about the number of commissioners. I've thought it more about the districts than the number of commissioners to start with. And I think when you talk about districting, are there natural areas within our city that create that kind of uniformity of, okay, the northwest quadrant is this and it has this many folks, southwest, et cetera. The hospital district, let's call it, that's still in its infancy. The Kelly Park area still in its infancy. You have the downtown area, clearly, east side of town is pretty much built out. But I think, when you have those I think you have like 4 or 5 kind of logical districts. Kelly Park, kind of that northern central corridor, if you want to call it southwest or southeast section of our town or east, you've got 5 different districts that I think are still not in a mature state yet to require formal districting. I think what's come up is, and you use the example, the Rock Springs Ridge example, because at one time there was three members of council.
And I didn't even know that, so
Well,
I wasn't picking on Rock Springs. I didn't know.
But it's good. It's a good example. So if all we're trying to do is solve for that scenario not taking place, do you really want to create districts just for that purpose? Whereas if we're all at large, again, we all have responsibilities to every single resident within the city of Apopka to do what's right.
Yes.
And I think as those pockets of developments that I just described start getting more mature, and you do have some clearly defined needs, because those will end up taking up lives of their own. Hospital district will look like something maybe with more medical-minded individuals. Kelly Park, as Wild Oaks takes on development, that might look like something different where you have a younger population or you're more established young professional families in the middle. So you just have different pockets of interest. And I think if we do this review down the road, that might be a more logical time to expand. But again, if we do talk expansion, obviously we have to consider additional salaries for the additional commissioners, the discretionary funds, and all the stuff that goes along financially if we expand.
So for now, sit on this and see about further input.
Yes. Yeah, we need to get, we've got 30 minutes, and if there's anybody.
That's
in the
okay.
public
That's
wants to-
okay.
I'm with
I'm
Commissioner
not in
Nesta. If
rush.
we've got to truncate and we don't finish,
That's
well,
okay.
hey, I'm
Well, I
committed
know,
to
but-
stopping at 7, but
No, what I'm saying is I want to make sure that the
Yeah.
people
They'll
get a
have-
chance to
Yeah,
speak.
they
So
will.
let's go
Okay.
ahead and.
Okay, we're ready to keep going?
Yep.
All right. All right, so the next section is 2.02, and this is election and terms. So this is how you're currently elected and how that works. And as you had pointed out, Commissioner Becker, Vice Mayor Becker, here, you are not commissioners, you are council members. And so there is inconsistency, which kind of points out what I was saying earlier. But there's nothing to discuss unless you want to change for that consistency issue, unless you want to talk about term limits. This would be the place where that would be an appropriate discussion.
I'm okay with the term limits.
so just for matter of public record, because Mr. Jack Douglas had written us all a letter, I just want to make sure I verbalize that's been entered in the public record as part of these proceedings. But no, you know, this is one of those deals where, you know, you're on two sides of the fence. Either you are on the side of the fence where you feel like the electorate establishes the term limits by the stroke of their ballot and yes or no, or you have a finite period of time. And you know, I think the 12 years is plenty. The 3 terms, I think it's plenty.
I'm good on that.
Because again, you don't want to do 2 terms because you might, you know, straddle the fence on people that may not be as productive that you are serving with, and you want to kind of get through that. But, you know, I think 3 terms is certainly fair.
And the other kind of topic too, that there's a couple different sections or a couple different items here is, do we want to keep it to 4-year terms?
Yeah, that's what 4 years is, I'm okay with.
Okay.
As far as creating a limit of how long to serve, that's a conversation that I'd like to hear from the residents.
Okay, well, the residents are here and we'll get to hear from them shortly. But also, like I said, you're going to have separate meetings, as long as you schedule them, for things that you're not really sure on and you want to hear more. That's the parking lot.
Right.
And so that could be a candidate for that. And after we hear from the public, y'all can decide it then. But anyway, that's what I brought up here, because if there was going to be a term limit amendment, this is where it would go.
Okay.
Okay?
And I just had one resident that indicated that rather than us serving 3-year, right, instead of serving 4, he felt like we should only serve 3. And so I just want to make sure that
Yeah,
I make that known.
Is that what a COE does? I think that's what a COE
Oh, I don't,
Yeah.
And again, all I need is a number and enough support for me to show you what it looks like. All right, so the next one is compensation expenses. And again, this is one where unless you change in the form of government, there's nothing to discuss. What would be discussing here if you decided to change the government, and one of the changes I would be bringing back to you, which apparently I will be, is there won't be a second section for the mayor's salary, because the mayor would be just another member of commission, and whatever the commission salary is would be the mayor's commission salary as well. So that last sentence of this provision would go out. I haven't really quickly looked at to see if there's anything else, but the second sentence would be unnecessary, and so it would be stricken as a part of the overall council manager versus strong mayor form of government. Any comments or questions about this section? All right, we're going to go to the next one. 2002.04. Again, unless you make a change in the form of address or the form of government, there's nothing to change here. If you do, then certain things will change here. And so obviously some of the powers that you typically see for a strong mayor would be changed if in fact you went to a council manager form of government. One of the things that you mentioned, Commissioner Velasquez, is I want to know what it looks like. Well, here's what it looks like. In a council manager form of government, then the mayor's titles are, they will be, for example, it might say something like they're the head of the government for emergency actions under certain circumstances, or the mayor's role is ceremonial, or, you know, so even with a weak mayor or a council manager form of government, certain things are still ascribed to the mayor, one of which is running meetings, typically. But other things that you see here, direct and supervised administration, chair and see that all laws and provisions of the charter would apply equally to everybody. So there wouldn't be a reason for them to be in this section and they would be stricken from this section. So that's what it would look like as I bring back amendments that would try to be for consideration of that change. Is there any reason for discuss this section beyond what I've explained? Let me know. I'm happy to hear.
Well, no, because we already know what a strong mayor is here in the city of Apopka. So there wouldn't be any discussion. It's here in black and white. I mean,
Well, so, and if I can just comment, if for some reason we don't want to move forward with a manager form of government, there's a lot of discussion that needs to happen on this section.
Yeah,
But-
this would be.
well,
So that's, I just want to make sure that this isn't
yeah,
it just,
but
we may
that's
come
what I'm
back to
just
this.
saying.
And this is what I meant before. If it turns out that as you consider it and hear from the public more, that it's more, I'll call it episodic, we really want to address this particular power or this particular thing so that we're not hamstrung, then you can do it and kind of pick and choose without completely throwing out the entire form of government. So you have, it's not all or nothing. It can be something in between if that's what you choose.
So if the city
okay.
council wanted to have the voting power, the authority to fire the city attorney's
Yes.
city clerk. So this will we insert that, will be here?
No, well,
Article
actually,
3.
you would
in Article
insert
3.
that in the section that where it says the city attorney can only be fired in this way, or can only be appointed in this way.
All
As I
right.
recall it, the city attorney is appointed or nominated, I forget word it uses, by the mayor, and then ratified by council.
Yes.
But it's less clear, but for reasons that I've already opined in writing, you still have, the way it's worded now, where the mayor has to be on the same page with at least two council people to remove. And if there's four and he's not on one of those four, then as it currently reads, my opinion would still be the same. And if that's an irritant, which clearly it was at one time, then that's something you could address let's address this specific thing, but still have a strong mayor government if you choose. This is all about you deciding what goes to the voters, and then the voters will tell you what they like. So I keep saying you get to choose, but only what gets to the voters. You don't ultimately get to decide.
All right. Well, we're, what?
Sure, I will explain. No, it's not ceremonial at all. As an example, and I'll use me as an example. I don't know that I was here at the meeting. If I was, I don't remember. But I do know what happened the first go-around, which this is my second tenure as city attorney, which is then Mayor Kilsheimer called me up or had someone call me up, I can't remember how it worked, and said, hey, I'd be interested in coming and talk to you about our city attorney position. I came and talked to him. He then brought my name before the council/commission, and then they all voted up or down. And I think it was, thankfully for me, I think it was 5 ups. And so I became the city attorney. I think something similar happened this time. And so the ratification means the mayor's the only one who can bring forth the name and say, this is who I think we should have. But ultimately, they have to have at least 2 more supporters for that person to be sitting in this chair. And that's true of also the city clerk, I believe, as well.
All directors.
Yeah. So that's how that goes.
And while you're on that subject, I think there's a misconception of the public that what a council member's role is in a city manager form of government. I think as far as, or city manager and all of directors, in the instances where you represent city manager forms of government, what input or what can a city council person do? If he doesn't like a director, can he fire a director?
No.
Okay.
The real way to explain the difference is that you have less people that you get to deal with directly than you might ordinarily think, but it's really not, in that regard, a whole lot different from the strong mayor. It is that though you have a professional executive as running the government, someone who in theory, depending on if you hire the right person, understands the rules of personnel and hiring and firing, understands how to deal with the labor union, understands the various roles of public safety, understands, a whole lot of stuff because in theory, they've been trained in public administration, perhaps, they've served in other roles in other cities, and then they are solely responsible for everybody else. Here's what that means. Instead of the council picking the police chief, the manager picks the police chief. If the council doesn't like the police chief, they tell the manager, we don't like him, and the manager either says, okay, he or she is gone, or the alternative is, then you're gone. And so the manager answers to the council, the employees answer to the manager. And the reason that's an important distinction is, and it's for the benefit of the employees, they do not need to have to serve two masters and try to figure out who the bosses are. And that's why in most charters, there's a specific prohibition against interference with administration. And so I don't have to worry if I'm the police chief or the public works director and one councilman says, I'm unhappy with your performance because the only person I got to worry about is my boss, and my boss is the manager. However, the manager has to worry because if enough people on the council don't like the public works director, I've got a decision to make. I've got to either get rid of the public works director or let them fire me and fall on my sword. One of those two things is happening. So the accountability from the employees is to the manager, and the manager to the council, and the council to the voters. So that's kind of the structure and how it works. And none of you can go in that form of government and go say to the police chief, we need more patrols on this side of the city, and public works, we need these potholes fixed, because all of that stuff would be considered an interference. It could be done, but only through the manager. You'd have to go to the manager and say, hey, there's potholes. Hey, manager, we got some break-ins over here. Hey, manager, we got some problem with sewage over here, or whatever the case may be. That's the difference.
All right, we need to kind of wrap this up because we got people who want to
Yeah.
speak.
All right, so so obviously, because we're going to go down the road of seeing what the language would look like, I already know that this is one of the sections that will have some changes to it as we go forward, for y'all to consider. 205 is general powers of council. Again, you have all the powers vested in the city council except those specifically reserved by charter to the electors of the city. This is very typical, meaning you can do everything you can except what the electors can do. What the electors can do is amend the charter. What the electors can do is set up a recall if they don't like what you're doing. That's what the electors can do. And so I have nothing to change there, and unless y'all want to discuss any changes there, we can go right to the next section. Okay?
So we're not going to discuss section 2.04 at this point?
Well, I thought we did, but let's go back.
Isn't that the mayor?
That's what we
only
just
if you
discussed. And I
change
said, I've already been directed to provide what it looks like with a council manager form of government. This is a section that will have to change.
Okay.
So there will be changes in accordance with the prior direction for
So
y'all to
this is
consider.
being put, as you said, the parking, no?
Based on what you told me, you already want to see it. That doesn't mean you're done discussing it. You can still bring it up as a parking
Okay.
lot issue and say, hey, this
Parking
is where
lot
we're
issue.
leaning. What do y'all think?
So the instruction is on section 1.01.
Right.
Is to draft a banner statement around changing the form of government. The amendments would be section 2.04. What amendments would I have to make if you were to take that course?
Correct. And subsequent sections as well. Yes. Okay?
So, but we wanted to be able to do two things. You are going to present the city manager form of government, but we still have this section here as the strong mayor. So,
You're going to give you have some language to look at and say, based on your prior direction, this is what we would submit to the voters, subject to any changes you want to make, on how this would look to be consistent with a council manager form of government.
okay.
So said differently, if the decision was to say no on section 1.01, would you, if you went down the path of the strong mayor and kept it, would there be any changes that you would have through points A through F if that were the case?
Sure,
Even if you kept the strong mayor.
sure.
Okay, if those are things you want to tell me now, that's a different kind of change. And it's like I said, it's more specific to, this is a concern I have specifically that I'd like to take away from the strong mayor, but still have a strong mayor form of government. So what would that be? And if there is, tell me, and then I will make a note of it. And that'll be a separate thing for you to look at.
Okay, so for now, I'll put that then in the parking lot.
Okay, you can, sure.
Okay.
All right. So, so there may be other changes.
Isn't that what I think, when I first said, well, let's not address this until we get the other, but then Commissioner Nesta said that there were some changes that he wanted to speak about on this section.
Well, there's the global idea of changing form of government, and then there's a more specific idea. I'm okay with the form of government, but I want to change the way this power is administered or that power is administered. And one of the examples we've already talked about is how to get rid of a city attorney or a clerk or whatever. And that's a specific thing that you can tweak or change that doesn't necessarily change the entire form of government.
But that example, that's Article 3, that we'll
Yes.
discuss when we get to that.
Correct. We just haven't gotten there yet.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
All right, so back to 2.05, I didn't see any changes wanting discussed there, but if there is, now's the time to let me know so we can discuss them. If not, 206 is the council-employee relationship. And this is part of that, this is the whole concept of the interference with administration that I mentioned earlier, and it's applicable to all of the forms of government. Whether it's the strong mayor, in which case only the mayor and/or the city administrator is supposed to deal with these folks, or the council manager, in which case it's only the manager that's supposed to deal with these folks. But no city commissioner shall in any manner dictate the appointment, removal of any city employee, nor shall a city commissioner give orders to any employee, that's the administration part, other than orders by action of the city council. So if all of you voted to have Commissioner Becker do something, or Commissioner Smith do something, or Commissioner Velasquez to do something, then that could happen. But in the absence of that, you don't mess with the employees. That's the mayor's job, that's the administrator's job. And that's what this is. Nothing herein, and this is also very common, shall be construed to deny city commissioner access to records or information. Because if you're going to try to do your jobs and you need to investigate performance, you can certainly go to the clerk and say, hey, I need to see the last 7 performance evaluations of these people, or whatever the case may be. You have that right always. And ironically, for most of the records, you'd have that right as a member of the public, not just because you're on the commission, but it's specifically built in here. So again, there's nothing to change here unless, from my perspective, unless you want to go down the road on council manager, which you already told me to at least give you the language, so you'll see the changes that I'm talking about.
The only questions I would have is related, and again, we'll talk about the charter positions, attorney, clerk, when we get to Article 3. But from a legalese perspective, this is where I find potential conflict. So it says, no city commissioner shall in any manner dictate the appointment or removal of any city employee. Dictate the appointment. How does that differ? Because obviously, when you look at section 2.04, point A, where it says department heads shall be appointed by the mayor and ratified by the city council, we're technically appointing them, ratifying them, but they're a city employee. So what I don't want to have happen is if there's language in here that's contradictive and a party can win out based off of word choices.
Yes.
That's where if you don't find concern there, I'm okay, but I want to make sure that we're
Well,
square.
in this particular thing, and it may be because I already understand the context of what is attempting to be said here, it's about interference. Like I said, in your current form of government, there are 2 people that should be able to deal directly with employees regarding complaints, regarding direction, regarding anything. These are the mayor and the city administrator, and that's all, not any of you all. So similarly, if you had a problem with fill in the blank person, you'd go to the mayor or the city administrator, not do it yourself. If you did, you'd be violating this provision. And that's, since I know that's the intention here, I haven't thought about it in the context of whether the ratification language is contradictory, but I don't think it is, because essentially that language is to provide that the mayor, although strong, is not a dictator. And that's true whoever sits in the chair. That's the check and balance part of the equation. And so that's how that all is supposed to work. It may be the kind of thing that when I say if you don't want to throw out the entire form of government, but want to change a specific thing, this is where you would consider, on the city attorney, the clerk, the ratification language, the department heads and all that. We can have that discussion, and then you just direct me to what to draft. At a given point, however, if the wings of the strong mayor are so clipped that he's no longer or she's no longer a strong mayor, then you might as well just change the form of government. It just depends on how you want to go about it, what it is you're trying to fix. Sometimes you got to be careful not to fix too much if that's really not the intention. But sometimes you want to start over and say, I want a whole new look. Okay, that's okay too.
So in this specific section, would it be valuable? So if a commissioner did violate this section, what type of
What's the problem?
consequences?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I was actually asked this by somebody else. I don't remember, I've had so many cities this week that I can't keep track of who's asked me what, but it's the same answer, which is there is no charter enforcement police other than the voters. You're not gonna get the state attorney come down here and filing charges because anybody violated the charter. You're not gonna have police come and arrest anybody. I call Chief Mike and say, hey, go arrest that guy, and you say, are you kidding me? That's not how it works. Similarly, constitutional violations don't end up in arrest. They do end up in constitutional lawsuits unless you're violating a specific criminal statute involving civil rights. So since none of that's true in the charter, you don't have anybody with authority to arrest you for violating the charter. But the voters can, through recall, remove you from office. And that's the accountability factor. And that is why whoever sits in this chair's main goal regarding this issue is to make sure that you don't unknowingly violate the charter. And it's why I spend the time, as I just did, saying, don't be directing employees because you're violating the charter. And while no one's going to arrest you, you might be recalled. And a recall thing, that's a longer discussion, but just trust me, it's a pain in the neck for the voters. But if it ever gets to the ballot, a lot of them succeed. Very few of them fail. So you'd rather not go down that road.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So on 2002.06, that's what I said, that's the interference with administration. So unless there's anybody who wants to change that, which it will be, you'll have some language because of council manager, but for, other than that, that would be it. So 2.07 is vacancies and filling of vacancies. This process is fine. If you wanted to consider a change, just tell me what the change would be, but this process is fine. One of the things that has come up in another city that I represent literally in the last couple of days, Jack's Beach, is the way their charter reads. It says, will be filled if there's a vacancy, someone quits, which has happened there because of the new Form 6. A commissioner said, I don't want to have anything part of it, and they quit. They got to fill the spot. How long are they filling it for? Your council says that your filling of vacancies, the unexpired term is less than 1 year. The remaining members of the city council shall appoint a person to fill the vacancy before the second regular meeting of the city council following the office being vacant. If the unexpired term exceeds 1 year, this is what I call the hybrid version, then the remaining members shall call an election to be held within 60 days or soon thereafter to comply with state election laws. There is no problem with this language. It is legally fine. Here are the contrary versions of that language. Some say will be filled for the remainder of the unexpired term, regardless of how long that is. If that's another 3 years, you could fill it for the entire 3 years by appointment of council. Jack's Beach says that you will fill it until the next regular municipal election. So if they appoint someone now, the next regular municipal election will be in November. And so the person will be appointed, but then will have to stand for election again in November so that the electorate gets to weigh in on whether they want to keep that person or they want somebody else. And that's so you have what I call the hybrid. The hybrid is for a smart, depending on how much time is left on the term, you can make the appointment. If it's longer than that period of time, you call the election. And there's a second version of the hybrid, which is if they've served more than half the term, then you appoint them for the remainder of the term. But if they've earned less than the half of the term, then it's to the next regular election. So if you have a 4-year term, someone quits in the first year, then you would only be able to appoint until the next regular election. If they served 2 years and a day, you could appoint till the end of the term. So those are the various options. Your option is a fine option. If you want to change it, I've told you what some of the other options are.
So if you fill a vacancy through appointment, what this doesn't say is, and I'll give an example. They get appointed, but then I saw in another city saying he will be appointed or she will be appointed to the next election, but that person will not be allowed to run, to file for the same seat to run. It doesn't
That
say
is
that
something,
here.
that is something you can do. And in terms of why people would argue in favor of that, well, you appointed them, they didn't actually stand for election, and now they have the benefit of incumbency without ever having run for election. And that's an advantage because people have been sitting there watching them and it's not fair. So they should only be able to serve and they shouldn't be able to run. And if that's position you take, I can make that amendment.
No, I actually feel if you appoint someone to fill a vacancy and that person wants to run for the next election, they should be allowed to do so.
And that's what this, as it currently stands, that is okay
In this charter,
in this charter. The only thing this charter does is tell you when you have to go to an election and when you can fill the seat for a certain period of time. You have, one of those two things will happen. The one thing that you may want to at least think about, and you don't have to decide today, is when it says that if the unexpired term exceeds 1 year. So let's say someone quits in the first 6 months. So now you got another 3.5 years left. The remaining members shall call an election to be held within 60 days. Now, why am I stopping there? Because elections cost money. And if you literally were forced right now to call election within the next 60 days, you better be prepared to put out, I think the latest estimate is like 25 grand to hold an election. You might know, Susan, but it's not cheap. And so that's why in Jack's, they don't say you call one within 60 days, they say the next municipal election, because you're going to do that anyway, and you're not going to have to pay any extra to add another
Well, we
candidate to the
already had
ballot.
an example of that, right? When Commissioner Nolan left office.
I wasn't here, but I remember that.
But we didn't have it within 60 days. We had it when the next election that we could attach to the Orange County Supervisor of Elections.
And
Which-
that
If
was,
memory serves,
Which
right?
might have been a violation of the charter.
No,
but
she,
if no one went after
we
you,
got her to wait to resign.
She just had her to wait to resign until, so to get within the 60-day window. So that's again, and one of the reasons why, and you already know this, the reasons why the resignations have happened in quite great flourish recently is because of people not wanting to do the Form 6, which if you weren't resigned by this end of December, you have to, even if you resign today. So that's the reason.
okay, so when Commissioner that resigned the seat that I'm currently at, I was offered to be appointed, but with the option of, we will appoint you to fill the seat until the next election, but you are not allowed to file to run. And so the decision I made was, no, let the people choose who they want in that seat. So I opted not for the appointment, but to actually run a campaign for the seat again.
I do not know that I can tell you that that was the correct thing to be told, because I haven't seen anything in the charter that says if you were appointed to fill a vacancy that you can't run the next time it's open. That you may have just been given wrong information, or maybe I've missed something, but I went through the charter and I don't think that's there.
Well, that was the option that I was given at that time, and that was why I made the decision.
Understood.
Not to take the appointment, but instead to run for office.
Understood. So again, if you're happy with this provision, there's nothing wrong with it. If you want to change it or
So,
consider
right,
changing it, the one thing you might consider is that 60-day thing. So you don't have to spend money that you don't have to spend. And if my recommendation would be, if you want to change that, to change it to the next regular municipal election instead of within 60 days, so you
No,
don't
so
have to pay extra.
I'm fine with the clarity of this. Had I known that then,
Right.
I wasn't aware of this language. I was only aware of what was offered. So
Understood.
I'm okay with this, because I think anyone that's appointed to fill a seat, I mean, we're serving the public, that they should have that option to be able to file to run.
Anything else on this section?
No.
But I think that maybe we should take out the 60-day and include what you said.
Yeah,
and
next
for the
regular
next
election.
election cycle.
Right.
Not just municipal, next
No.
election by Orange County. Well, you could have the presidential preference primary would be an election, but it's not a municipal election.
Well, if that is, in your charter it is, you
Yeah, right.
automatically go to the presidential primary. The reason I said municipal election is because elections are held all the time, and most of the elections, somebody's up for election. The question that came up in Jack's Beach is that the seat that was up for election, or the seats that were up for election, were not the one where the guy resigned. But yet that is the next municipal election. And they were going to have to pay the supervisor of elections to hold that election regardless. So adding another name to it doesn't cost them any more money. But if it was having to do it all by itself, then they'd be paying money at a next election that they wouldn't otherwise have to pay. And so whether that's in 60 days or 6 months, the idea is just to save money that you don't need to spend.
But
That's the issue.
But you could do the primary and the general election, or not which, I mean, maybe you're calling those municipal elections. They would be.
Whenever somebody on this.
Okay,
dime
that's
would
all,
be
no,
election.
but I'm saying is a county officer is primary in August and a general in November.
Right.
Ours is in March. So I would just say any election
Any
where
election.
either city, county, or
Or-
state would be,
I'll bring you some language,
okay.
and we can have that discussion, not a problem. All right, so let me see, I think it's one more section. All right, 208 city council meetings, again, this one actually stood out to me as something that you really need to seriously consider. And this was the only one that struck me as this is a problem. And it's a problem that hasn't manifested, but certainly could. And I'm shocked to see it, frankly. And that is, it says that a majority of the city council should constitute a quorum. No action of the city council shall be valid unless adopted by the affirmative vote of a majority of the city council, and the key language is present and voting. So you literally have a situation where two people are a quorum of a three-member panel, if that's who shows up, and two people could make legislation for the entire city. That is not normal. What is normal is, it's called variously the rule of threes or majority only or whatever, but in a five-member council, if you call it the rule of threes, that means no matter what, you have to have at least 3 votes to pass anything. So if you happen to have a meeting where 2 council members are absent and 3 are present, all 3 have to vote for it. It can't be, oh, well, 2 is enough. But under this, if you have that situation, 2 is all you need. So this is one I would seriously consider sending to the voters before it becomes a headache, because at some point, it will become a headache.
okay. Everybody go with that one?
Sure.
Okay.
All right. And so if that was changed, it would be to what I said below,
Yeah.
3 or more members, as opposed to the majority of people present, okay? And that is it for what I have. Now, you have your public period or any other
Well,
direction you want to
we're
provide? for
down
me?
to just one, we got time for one public comment.
Why can't we do more than one?
Well, because we got, it's 5 to 7 is our,
And we can't go past that?
It's up to y'all.
Can we
My
go past it?
recommendation was 2 hours, so y'all aren't worn out.
Yeah, we can go past 7 to
We
hear
can
the
go
public.
past 7.
well, it's noticed for 5 to 7? I'm fine.
The
Yeah.
people who are here. If y'all want to, in your discretion, your work is concluded, so this is really about the public, and so it's up to you guys.
Correct. We will hear them out.
Go ahead.
Dennis New, 105 West Magnolia Street, and I'm one of those people that's been a resident here all my life. I want to break it down into a little bit of common sense for the people that are watching this meeting or thinking about a charter change. How many meetings have I been to where everybody has heard, well, there's no money for that, there's no money for this? So I ask you the common sense question, why do we pay her, and I don't know the exact number, so this is not a quote, but why do we pay a mayor $100,000 a year and a city manager $100,000 a year? By the time they get their benefits package and everything, we're paying $300,000 for duplicated services. That's point 1. Point 2, we need to clear up the language on the charter officers. When the council votes on a charter officer and 3 of them vote to terminate him or her, then pack your bags, Alice, you're gone. That's the way it works. I also believe that the fire chief and the police chief should be charter officers, appointed by a city manager, ratified by you guys, but they shouldn't have to worry about political turmoil. Yes, I'm one of those people that agrees we should remove the strong mayor type of governance and go to the business platform. But I also think in that effect, instead of having a mayor, we should have a chairperson. 5 council members, 1 chairperson, and rotated on 6-month or annually basis so that during your term, each of you get to be the chairperson one time because the council as a whole directs the manager what to do. Secondly, I appreciate everything that all 5 of you do. And I want everybody to hear this, all 5 of you, because I see you on social media at public events. I see you interacting with your constituents. I see you doing things for this city all the time, and I know the stipend that you get is a miserably small amount. We could take a little of the money in the cost savings of not having a quote-unquote paid mayor and increase the stipend for the 5 of you since you're so active. We need to change the language in the charter as to who monitors and enforces the rules and regulations of our city elections. Right now, the city clerk is doing the best she can, but she has no charter authority to enforce the rules. So she has to defer everything to the attorney or right now our strong mayor. The city clerk, the city attorney, the police chief, and the fire chief should all be governed by the entire council as charter officers. That way they don't have to worry about political futures. If the manager's got a problem with one of them, then the manager talks to the city council and the city council decides. If that were the case now, we'd have been looking for a new fire chief after Austin Duran's death. So it's time for the city to make a decision. We can't fire an elected mayor. We have to recall him. And I can tell you from personal experience, that wasn't real successful. Okay? But we can, through the constituents' voice to the council members, voice our opinion about a city manager and have him terminated. It gives us better control over the operation of the city.
Todd Bankson, 1444 Stormway Court. I don't think that right now we can obviously make a decision. I think this is a good thing for us to gather, get information from Mr. Shepherd, and then be able to communicate with you all via email or wherever. And just a lot of information to take in. Commissioner Smith, one of the things you said about the mayor getting voted for by his constituents, and that's who they elected, but we also have to set ourselves up for success. And just like for you being an educator, you couldn't be one if you didn't have a certain level of education. You had to have certain things. Well, the same thing for city managers. They go to school, they attend. So the problem with our system is I can be mayor. If I'm popular and I go buy people breakfast and shake hands and they hire me, I'm not qualified to be the mayor. So a certain level of having a person in there that has the right skill sets, education, knowledge, employee laws and all that stuff around the state and federal is very important. That part of that. Ratify, I'd like to talk about. So ratify is the mayor can put somebody forward, police chief, and then 2 of the 4 vote.
Plus the mayor. Because even though it's actually happened before, although not here, where the mayor has come up with an appointment and then changed his or her mind, but then the person still got 3 votes. So it matters how the charter's worded. In this case, that wouldn't work because it still has to have the mayor's support. But that's how this became an issue before, because the thought was previously, when they wanted to get rid of the prior city attorney, that 3 of them that weren't the mayor would be sufficient, but that's not the way the charter is written. It could be written that way, it's just not currently. And that's where the ratification becomes important. So the mayor has the power to bring forth a name, but he or she, whoever it happens to be at the time, has to get at least 2 other votes in addition to their own to make that happen. That's the ratification part.
Okay, thank you.
Albert McKinney, 603 Golden Gem Road. Thank you, Commissioner Becker, for your educational and eloquent presentation tonight. You brought out some very salient points. One of the things that sticks in my mind is over the last year of continuously been coming here is the fact that I like to see things as being fair and equitable for the public. When our current mayor describes your positions, commissioners, as purely ceremonial, it offends me and it offends a lot of people. So personally, I would like to see a weak form of mayor and a city manager. The position of commissioners is very important. And when I look at seeing Commissioner Becker move on, I'm very disappointed. One of the reasons I'm very disappointed is it appears that we don't educate the public sufficiently to provide competent candidates to take the place of the commissioners here. If we were to go for more commissioners, I doubt if we would get the quality of commissioners available to do your jobs. I know for a fact that a lot of you put in 40 hours a week during busy times. One of the things that disturbs me is the quality of candidates currently looking to serve as commissioners don't even appear to be able to read this campaign book. Because today I see numerous things that I find are unacceptable in terms of the commissioners and the city are unable to police the qualifications and check to see whether somebody is a legitimate candidate. If they're not a legitimate candidate, I don't think they're fit to serve me if they can't read this book and stand by the rules that need to be followed. I would hope in the charter we find some way to resolve situations where the public seem to be at odds with what's happening in the elections.
Jeff Tyre, 1120 Leg Drive. I just wanted to thank all of you for having these meetings. This is very important, and I think we need to maybe even think about not rushing through these, like you were saying, Commissioner. We need to take our time, work through this process, and whether you're for a strong mayor government or a professional city manager, I think it's important that this go to the voters. You allow that decision to go to the voters on a ballot. We deserve that. I think a lot of this stuff can be cleaned up with what the attorney talked about with the language. The problem that we had with our former attorney and the majority of city council would like to remove him from office. Well, we had that issue where it didn't happen. And I agree with Dennis, with charter members, the police chief, the fire chief, and the city attorney should be on that list. If the majority of the council wants to remove that person from that seat, that needs to happen. We elect you commissioners to do that, to look after us, to make sure the right things are happening. So maybe if we can get some of that language straightened out, we don't have to change our form of government. But at least let the voters have the opportunity to decide that. Thank you.
That it?
Good evening, Sylvester Hall, 3091 Rolling Hills Lane. Again, I want to thank everybody because this is very educational, and I got in a little late, but I wanted to be here. When you hear me say that we're in a national crisis because too many good people sitting around watching bad things happen and not speaking up, saying anything about it, well, when I come in tonight, I look at the crowd. And we're talking about our city charter. Why are our residents so disengaged with what's going on? When we talk about politics, we always say, hey, look, it's on the local level that really count. So I look around here and I see the same old faces. So how do we connect with that crowd? And what I don't want us to lose face here tonight, what we're talking about is the city, it's the people. We're representing the people. Not an interest, not a position of power, or how we can gain this or how we can gain that. What's the strategy to stay in power here? We're talking about honoring the people, giving them the best service that we can give. For the 60 days, for the vacancy, if it's over 60 days, yes, there should be an election. We got money for everything. So $25,000 or how much it costs, it's not an issue because when you do that, what you're doing, you're cutting out the will of the people. So if I have somebody who drop out 6 months, now the mayor or whoever have that power to appoint somebody, now you just discarded what the people had to say because you didn't give them a choice to choose who they want to sit in that seat. You made that position. And so that should never be the case, never be the case. And just watching for the last 2 years, the city commissioners, if you guys ladies are gonna be in tune to what's going on, it takes a lot of time. I look at what is thrown before you. I look at the preparation that it needs to take for you to make an educated decision, and that takes a lot of time. I've been doing it, quote unquote, without being in your seat, and it's very challenging. But it's a purpose for me of doing this. And that purpose is I'm tired of the residents, I'm tired of the people being boo-booed on by our elected officials. And so that's my personal crusade. I will say that half of the mayor's salary, that's what all of you deserve. Because if you're going to do this job effectively, nobody's going to, what kind of quality of service we think we're going to get as a people when we paying y'all to do a full-time job? We paying you part-time pennies to do a full-time job, to look after us. That's the same oxymoron that we use with teachers. They're our tomorrow for our country. They're teaching our kids, but we pay them like crap. Our police, our firefighters, every time they walk out the door, they're putting their life on the line. They should have the best of everything. So I'm going to reserve a lot of my thoughts, but you will hear them. And one thing I did, we have to find a better way of educating the public. This should be in everybody's household in the city of Apopka. We have to find a way to educate the public, period. If we don't do that, we're doing a disservice to the city. Thank you.
Anybody else?
John Cloran, 593 Usler Road in Apopka. Dealing with the election. If you're going to run an election, it needs to be one that everybody can vote in. If you put this in a primary election, I won't vote because I'm an independent. I vote the way I want to vote. I don't believe in Republicans. I don't believe in Democrats. But if that's what I have found out, being a county resident and being a city of Apopka resident, when it comes to primaries, I'm not allowed to vote. And if I'm not allowed to vote, why am I going to go vote for something or someone who's running for the city? Because I'm not really wanted. So I suggest you keep it with the general election or the city's general election. Thank you very much.
You know
All
what?
right.
Thank you for mentioning that, because I do watch in Orange County, I watch the registration of voters. And right now, I believe the independent voters are outnumbering both Democrats and Republicans. And that's a concern.
All right. With that, we'll see you next Wednesday.